Welcome. Welcome to another episode of The Impact of AI, where each episode we explore how AI impacts us both professionally and personally on a daily basis. This week, we are happy to have this sponsored by AI Time Journal and supported by women leaders in data and artificial intelligence. Our guest, Anna Prouse, has an extensive background in international affairs globally, which we will definitely get to explore much more today. But what's interesting is how she's been able to apply her background in international relations with a new adventure that she's working on with a company called Atmo that's using artificial intelligence to build weather engines that's going to enable governments worldwide to really help them make better informed decisions. So thank you, Anna, for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Nice to be here.
Yes, I'm really excited about this topic. I think what we'd like to start with first is really talk a little bit about your career journey. I saw that you had an interest in music early on, and then you've really explored international affairs, and you've been working with some unique government entities over the course of your life, and then finally, taking all of that and wrapping around your experiences and working with this new company. So yeah, I'd love to hear your journey.
I don't really, now you brought up the music and I had even forgotten about it. Yes, well, I mean, just, I'm Italian to start with. I had, in Italy we play instruments. So that's where the piano comes in. And I majored in piano at the Milan Conservatory, not as a main topic because I had to also go to the university. So I have, I studied political science. And then, I could not really see myself working in a traditional company, doing traditional things. I know my parents wanted me to work for like a Sony and, and take a degree, political science, but with a business angle. I just couldn't see myself. I would just get anxious just at the idea of doing it. Mm-hmm. Now, from there to actually figuring out what I wanted to do was very unclear. But where I got the inspiration, and don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not a Mother Teresa, but in my early 20s, I went to India on my own and went through India on a bus. And I stopped in Calcutta to work with Mother Teresa, for whom I had always a big admiration. And that's where I realized that I wanted to, again, I'm not a Mother Teresa. I knew I would never be one. But that's where I realized I got to do something with my bones. I want to do something out there in the world, bearing in mind that I am not her. What can I do? So that initially confused the hell out of me. And then I started figuring myself out. And then I started, writing cultural guides in countries that no one wanted to go to, like Iran. And then apparently I wrote pretty well, and I got hired by La Repubblica, an Italian major newspaper, as a foreign correspondent. And that's where I started to breathe the international world. And, journalism to me still nowadays is on paper the nicest job that one could have if you're curious, if you, want to know, also learn to know different mindsets. But unfortunately, I found it very hard to write what I had to write. It's all newspapers have a boss, and they want usually you to say what the line of the newspaper is. So I started struggling with that when I was in Iran. I actually landed in Tehran on September 12th, the day after the famous September 11, because I had been in Iran so often that I managed to get a visa real quickly and get into the country. And I couldn't find American flags being burnt. I couldn't find the anger that everyone wanted to hear about. I could just find people who were appalled, who, I had been in Iran before, and in the past, the first thing they always said is like, welcome to Iran. And here, when I first arrived, it's like, we're so sorry for what happened, even at the border. And even if I said, well, I'm not American, and they were like, doesn't matter. We're so sorry for what happened. And that was not what this world wanted to hear. They wanted me to find angry Iranians burning American flags. And you can hunt those down. There's always niche of crazy people around, but that was not the majority. And that's where my journey with journalism, I decided I can't do this for a long time. And I won a competition with International Red Cross. I had always volunteered with the Red Cross and in an ambulance. And so there was this competition coming out for the International Red Cross as an International Red Cross Delegate. And I decided to go for it. And again, not expecting anything out of it. Actually, it was friends who signed me up for it. And I just did it. And then out of, I think initially 300 people, they picked out 2. And that's when I got a call on, June 8th. Actually, I left on June 8, 2003. I got a call on June 4. Do you want to pack your stuff and go to Baghdad and set up a field hospital in Baghdad?
Oh.
And, that's where it hits, where, there's always like, whoa, I haven't done this before. I don't know how to do this. Mm-hmm. How do I set up a field hospital in a war zone? And then I said, there's probably no one who has ever done this, really. I mean, this is new. It's Baghdad. It's a different war. It's I know the region. Just go for it. And so 4 days later, I was on an old Ilyushin flying into Baghdad, into a war zone. And, that then what should have been a few months of, setting up a field hospital. And that's when then the US administration, got me on board to come and work for them, because apparently I had a way to go around people who were, terrorists. Mm-hmm. The Ministry of Health was in the hand of a former terrorist group. And I could go in there and others could not. I was accepted and others could not. That's where I also think the fact of having journalistic skills, being a good listener, not judging, trying to understand where these people are coming from, not just going in there and thinking, oh, these are a bunch of crazies. Yes, they are, but why have they become what they are? Right. And I like to believe that people felt that. They really felt that there was a genuine interest in understanding, so they would understand me. Right. It goes both ways. Respect goes both ways.
Right. Do you think at this point in time you really understood that this international affairs and government relationship was your thing, or it hadn't quite connected the dots yet?
It hadn't connected the dots yet. I was just jumping on the trains that were coming by.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity, just go for it. And so when I got this this offer from the CPA, which was the Coalition Provincial Authority in Baghdad, I couldn't believe it. My first question was like, why me? I'm not American, I'm Italian. And that's where I also realized, America has something that when they like someone, doesn't really matter where you come from. Right. I can also say, in Italy, you've got to be, not only friends of someone, but they wouldn't hire a French expert in, even if that person was good. They wouldn't hire an American. It has to be an Italian. Whereas America, in that sense, is very open. So my first comment was like, I'm Italian. They were like, we don't care. You know what you're doing, so come and work for us. And that's what I did. And frankly, after 2 years in Baghdad, I had it. I had been shot at. I had friends get blown up. I went through a lot of drama. And, seeing a whole full-fledged civil war going on, I just didn't see my role. I mean, I wanted to make a difference. I didn't want to get killed. But, I was ready to put my life at risk, but at least there needed to be something on the other side, and I just couldn't see this going anywhere. What we were doing there, I couldn't see it go anywhere. So I decided I am going back to Italy. I've had it. And that's where General Prouse approached me and said, I started the surge And I need you to go in southern Iraq, where there's a strong Iranian influence, and with the fact that you know Iran really well and you got also their respects. And I want you to go down south and be in charge of one of these PRT, which are these provincial reconstruction teams, because the US had realized that there was way too many people who were cocooned up on military bases, and no one went out and no one knew what was going out there. So Prouse decided I start picking people who go out there and connect those, connect the two.
Right.
I said no. I said, hell no, I'm not doing it. I think very highly of you, General, but I'm not doing it. And the South is very conservative. I mean, women are all in a chador, and it's very pro-Iranian. It's very anti-American, and I'm a woman. I mean, how can you think that I can have a say in a place where there are absolutely no women around who have a say? And that's where also the Italian ambassador helped. He was my mentor, very good friend of mine. And he said, give it a shot, because you would be amazed how much women can have a say if they play their cards right. And he was right.
Good advice. Yeah.
He was right. It took a while. It took a while mainly to show that I have as much courage or even more, because then when we women want to succeed, we got to do it better. So the first thing, the governor, who was, very pro-Iran, and I had just canceled the hospital that, the US Army had promised. And I had just canceled it. And I said, we're not building another hospital when there's no doctors, there's no nurses, there's nothing. So let's build the capacity, and then I'll build you the hospital. And, in classic Iraqi fashion, he got mad at me and he blew me up. He put a roadside bomb. He invited me to a ribbon cutting, and I knew it was a trap. But, the American army said, we'll put some, drones on top of you, and we'll put you in it was all armored vehicle. They won't know in which one you are. And of course they knew in which one I was. And, the drones didn't do anything. They just, they just took pictures of the big bang. And, I'm still deaf from one ear from that one. And 2 days later, the governor called me. We knew it was the governor. And he called me and he invited me to go hunting with him. Huh. And I went. And that was, I didn't know, will he extract his gun and just shoot me and make his life really easy? Or is he trying me? And he was trying me. He was, when I told him yes, I said, what's the plan? He had no plan. He expected me to say no. And he wanted to prove to his people that I had no courage, that I was just one like all the others who would stay on a military base for years. And the fact that I went was a proof of courage. And that is hugely valued in cultures that, are violent and courageous at the same time. And that's where I slowly started to gain the respect of the leadership, but then also the respect of the people. There were not many women going out, and, I started also showing, because as an advisor then to a government, you got to show them how to do it. I think we expect them to know what democracy is. Oh, here we are, and here's an injection, and now this is democracy. They need to learn how to govern in a more democratic fashion. So talking to their people, knowing what their needs are. So I started having complaint days where I would listen to these hordes of people who would show up, or I would go in the park and listen to them and take notes and then hand them over to the governor, because he needed to start being responsible for his people. And then the governor started having complaint days. And then the chief of police started having complaint days. They started saying that, well, if I want to be reelected, I need to start doing something for the people. So it was doing things and then having them do them too, and then slowly pull back and put them in charge. So I stayed in Iraq for 8 years. I took that job in southern Iraq saying, I'm good at startups. I can start it. In the meantime, get your act together and find someone who can then do it in the long run, because I don't have it in me. But I had it in me, when given the right team, given people with, as we say in Italian, il sacro fuoco, the sacred fire, when you also start seeing that there's improvement, then you enjoy it. You enjoy your job, even if it's in a war zone. And then after 8 years, it was time to leave. I sent an email I spoke to the Italian government and then to General Prouse. And he said, listen, come to the United States. We will help you to get a visa for extraordinary merits and come and work for us. And that's how I then moved to the United States. And, I have a picture of me taking the metro in DC.
Yeah.
And not knowing how to buy a metro ticket. Because when I left, I left, what is in the civilized world, there was always a booth with a human being and you give $1 and then you get your ticket. Yeah. And machines talking to you. So yes, I was used to taking Black Hawks to go into work and doing all this extraordinary stuff, which for me was not extraordinary, it was normal. Yeah. But then I'm here in DC and I don't have a clue on how to buy a metro ticket. So the challenge coming back was the big question that no one thought I would make it. And I wasn't sure, I wasn't quite sure if I could adapt to being normal again, adapt to being just, your average Joe. Not always at the center of attention. I would sit in Iraq at the head of tables full of men with mustache and Kalashnikovs. And I didn't even notice that it was weird. I had journalists come in and say, are you aware of how weird this is? And I would have a flak jacket and with flowers in there to look less intimidating. I would, play the less intimidating angle, but it was normal. And I was wondering, can I live in a world where no one knows who I am, where I need to take the metro, everyone will push me around, I have a normal job, I won't be, don't get me wrong, about this hero in a war zone who survives, and I wasn't sure. And instead, I realized that I don't get thrilled by getting shot at. I really don't. There's a lot of, you see it also, soldiers who come back and they crave the adrenaline of going into the battle. I don't crave that. I put a good fight, put a very brave face, but I don't like it. What I do like is the intellectual stimulation that Iraq brought to the table. Every morning there was something huge to solve, and I loved that. And so once I figured that out, I said, I'm fine in this part of the world as long as I find something that wake up in the morning and I was like, I need to figure this out. How do I do this? And that's then, I worked in DC for a few years. I have to, and that is still in my DNA. I'm still very curious about the world. So I need always to find a balance where I live in a place, but then I have to get out. I still have to go. So the first years after Iraq, I had made it very clear, I don't want to have anything to do with Iraq. I need to cleanse. I also have, it's like a tired outlook on things. I don't have fresh eyes, and you need fresh people to look at big problems. So I was put on, I was sent to Somalia, Libya. That was the whole phase of the Arab Spring. So I spent a lot of times in those countries. I was very much involved in the Syria conflict. And then my husband got a job with Google. My husband is a retired Marine colonel whom I had met in Baghdad. He got a job at Google. And at that time, I just needed to be close to an airport to go into parts of the world. Mm-hmm. So I said, California, great. As an Italian, how could you say no to California? Let's go for it. And then there was an opening at Google for, being in charge of government relations for a project, which was Project Learn. It was balloons in the stratosphere delivering connectivity.
Yes, I remember that. Yes.
in countries that have no connectivity. And that was sort of my way to say, I might step back from engaging continuously in countries, but delivering connectivity, that's the first step also to counter extremism. Because
Right.
the extremists out there, they can just tell people whatever they want. And these people they don't know what I had learned in Iraq. People who were around me or people that saw me regularly changed their views on the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if they see us, they probably will change the views. If they hear us, they'll probably, because we're not monsters as, these extremists want to depict us.
Right.
But we have no tools to show them that we're not monsters.
But
So,
I recognize that this also feeds that earlier comment that you made about wanting to make a difference.
yeah.
So you're still in that government policy, but you've slightly shifted, and now you're focused on something new, the weather balloons and the technology, but you're still using the background that you've accomplished with the governments to help facilitate that where maybe others couldn't have before you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a constant thing in my life. I want to try to, I think we all make a difference. For example, I missed the train. I jumped on a bunch of trains in my life. I missed the children train. I don't have kids because I met my husband late in life. And so I think I don't want to sound like someone that I think we all thrive to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I bring it to a level where, yes, you're right. Even with Google, it was something that made a difference in the world. And even now with Atmo, with the startup that I'm working for now, it is, predict weather in a much more accurate and especially cost-effective way, so that governments who cannot afford the multi-billion systems that the US and Europe and Japan can afford still can have accurate weather prediction. And when you turn the TV on, it's one calamity after the other. I mean, Indonesia has been hit by this, and then you look at Vietnam, and then you look at droughts in Africa, and it's getting worse and worse by the year. And there's all these big, and I'm a doer, and it's not like you always have to divide people in doers and thinkers, but I am not I'm not good. I don't thrive at conferences. I don't thrive at, I'm good at rolling up my sleeves and get done whatever I can do. Mm-hmm. So, we talk a lot about climate change. And I thought, well, I'm not someone who adds value if I go to the Glasgows of this world, but where I might add value is convince governments who trust me, because I have now a career of 20 years. I show up in Africa and they know me. It's Sister Anna. They hadn't seen me in a year and a half during COVID. And it's like, oh, Sister Anna's back. Oh, welcome back, Sister Anna. So I want to bring that to the table, because if a foreigner whom they don't know comes up with a new technology, they will be skeptical, and we see it.
Right.
They're skeptical about it. They don't believe it. They always think, oh, where's the catch?
Yeah.
Instead, with me, it's like, well, no, she's like one of us. So if she pushes it, it means that it's good for us. So I open the doors where others would take a long time to open doors.
So let me just take a minute to do an intro of Atmo, so that people, as we continue the conversation, they'll have a baseline understanding. So Atmo, it's spelled ATMO, uses artificial intelligence to build weather engines that will enable governments worldwide to make critical decisions. Atmo is utilizing this to lower the cost for the governments to be able to use weather to their advantage, making their country safer to face of climate change. But also the governments will be able to improve their country's agribusiness exponentially, better their disaster preparedness, and increase their safety in aviation and maritime transportation. And the role that you've now played, so you've been with Atmo for just about a year, the role that you have is you're coming in there with this huge knowledge of international affairs, and specifically working with a lot of these governments that you just mentioned with your time at Google. A lot of the countries that really can utilize this technology are the ones that don't have the technology out there already, which happens to be the countries that you've been working with for the most of your career.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's not some I haven't really worked in, but I know someone who has.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like people who say, oh, I can work anywhere in the world. Like, we got a call from, some countries that I have never been to.
Mm-hmm.
But I have an expertise where I can pick up the phone and I can find someone who knows the, government officials there who can make the intros. As you say, it's, now we're probably going, we're branching out, not only in Africa, also Southeast Asia. I have, I work there not as extensively, but I work there a lot with Google. And there again, they know me. And it just makes things easier, where then other startups might fail, because startups don't have a long time to prove themselves. So government relations has a word in there that is difficult, especially in this part of the world. Relations take a long time to build. And in Silicon Valley, there is not the idea of long time. I remember once I was with some Africans, I was like, oh, please, we got to get moving. And they were like, ma'am, you might have the watch, but I have the time. So I am, again, like in the past, I was between two worlds, which was the Iraqi world and the US world. Now I find myself between Silicon Valley and the rest of the world, and where this is fast moving. If you say that something is easy here, it means that by close of business today, it's done. If an African says, and I have a consultant who's fantastic, but he overutilizes the word easy. I had to ban that word from his vocabulary, saying, never say that word with people in Silicon Valley. Because in Africa, it means that you might not have to believe in reincarnation for something to happen. Here, it means, is it close of business today or close of business Friday? So there's completely two different approaches on also how to go to these countries. And you don't go and have a presentation. It's not about the PowerPoint slides. I mean, people here work weeks on a PowerPoint slide. They will barely look at it. It is about building a relation. So I stay in hotels that are not usually the ones where foreigners stay, but where government officials go and have their behind the scenes meetings, or where their wives, their spouses go for tea on Sunday. I know where they go to mass, or where they go to the mosque. I know a lot, or where they go to the gym. Just those little things. And I start going to the gym, and then I am part of the furniture, and then they say, oh, and then they start talking to you. And that's how you build. And then they start inviting you over to, for coffee. And then it escalates to, lunch and then dinner. But that's what it takes. If people think that they just show up and just say, here I am, and here's a slide. Do you agree? Can you sign a letter of agreement? And off you fly back to America. That's not how it works.
So let's pivot a little bit more to Atmo. Can you give us some more insights into what Atmo's doing?
Well, Atmo is applying artificial intelligence to weather data.
Okay.
And, weather data is one of the most, there's plenty out there, and they have been gathered for decades. So there's not a lack of data. It's just artificial intelligence has not been applied to study how, the patterns, the weather patterns work out. So, and that, of course, if you put a supercomputer to do that instead of the humans that usually are behind these computers, it gets the costs way down. So, one of the things is a lot of countries cannot afford all those, the supercomputers that, other countries have. Not many. The majority of countries cannot afford them. And, one of what Atmo provides is the hardware and the software, because one of the things that I learned in life is stakeholders want technologies to be in their control. They want to know what is happening. So the challenge, for example, with the balloons, the Google balloons in the stratosphere, the biggest challenge was we don't know what's on that balloon. You might have cameras and you might be spying on us. And, it's my word against their suspicions, and it's national security suspicions. So it's hard to fight arguments like that when you can't pull down every balloon to get them to inspect it. So when I decided to work with Atmo, my question number one was, where are you putting the hardware and the software? Because if it's in the cloud, we'll have problems with these people. Because the cloud is, we understand what it is, but for them it's like, yeah, but I don't control it. And you might share information. And the fact that we deliver it and we put it in their operations center and we adapt to their requirements. So every supercomputer is built on purpose for each country. So it's not like we do something and we deliver to Indonesia what we're now delivering to Uganda. The fact that we have, constant calls and I'm constantly going back and forth so that they feel part of the dream. It's not something that we just throw on them and say, oh, you use it. It will work out. I know we use it together. We listen to you. And, Uganda has huge locust invasions. I had no idea what a locust invasion was. I hadn't heard about it. But then when you start looking at what those are, I'm like, holy Toledo, this is a disaster. And Uganda has those. We can help them in foreseeing those, because all those are the locust movements of locusts is dictated by weather. But that we can't do that in Indonesia because they don't have locust invasions. And stakeholders around the world really want things tailored to them. And that's what I learned. And that's what we're doing at Atmo. And that's why I'm also going with, our chief technology officer regularly. We went twice already to Uganda. They immediately signed an agreement, going now to Kenya again, going to Indonesia, because they want to be part of it and we make them feel part of it.
Can you give us a little bit more, maybe a couple more examples of how you're using the predictive analytics in the weather? Maybe some more real world kind of examples. Yeah.
Okay. Well, droughts, for example, is huge.
Okay.
Human wildlife conflict. It's due. So we're also tapping into conflicts. We're working in northern Kenya with an NGO who works with FAO, UN, the Food and Agriculture Program, to fight human wildlife conflict. So to address human wildlife conflict. And that is also, it's like all these, the movement of wildlife and humans in that part of the world depends a lot on weather, on drought. Mm-hmm. So there's huge conflicts, there's huge things that one can, address. The economy of countries collapses when there's disasters. There's something that countries also need to start thinking of. I remember when I went to Indonesia with Loon, and I was saying, you could connect the unconnected when the calamities hit. We could also help you. And a lot of these countries are so used to disasters that they say, oh, if we've dealt with them, we'll keep on dealing with them. And so we don't have the need. But with Atmo, I feel like it's so tangible and right there. And it is affordable compared to all the rest that they have heard, that, it's sort of sometimes too good to be true. I can see their faces like, where's the catch here? But, that's right now, I literally only started in September, and we nailed immediately a contract with Uganda, and we're moving in Kenya. And now I'm, looking at Southeast Asia, and also in the US, within the US military, so it's not just the technology is better, period. The fact that it's also more affordable gave us, and, I need to look at what I want to support most. It's also, it's a startup of very few people still. So it's back to where would I want us to have an impact? That's the world that to me calls more than any other world. But of course, also the US military, they are the first ones who are, called when there's disasters happening. They're the first responders. So we need to, also see if we can, support internally in the US.
I was listening to the very focused around each country, but weather patterns aren't contained within one country versus another. They typically, for example, yes, you mentioned the locust in one particular country is not the same as another, but there are still weather patterns that do flow from one country to another. Is Atmo taking that into account as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. We are. And we also signed an agreement with COMESA, which is a group of 20 plus countries in Africa. So, so to start looking at regions, we are in talks with the East African community, to your point, to look at a region. Those organizations are hard to get started. And because I know that I waste some time, but not too much time. So we have an agreement with COMESA, but then I want to start getting a few countries on board so that they sign the agreement. They see that it works in northern Kenya, in Uganda. We're doing some stuff also, in Somalia, and then get their buy-in because they need tangible results. And once we get tangible results in a smaller area, which is still huge because Kenya is a huge country, Uganda is a huge country. But the idea is then to start doing, the whole Horn of Africa, East Africa, and then move on to the other parts of Africa. And the same in Southeast Asia. There's big conglomerates that we are looking at, but they're very bureaucratic, even more than governments themselves. So it's getting their buy-in, but then working with governments so that then the bigger ones also want to benefit an entire region.
So then the data is not just collected locally within the country, you're also pulling data from external resources like national weather. I don't remember the names off the top of my head, but some of those national weather data repositories.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So then I can probably surmise that yes, we're collecting data from a lot of data sources, and then some of that is focused on how that impacts the country that you've got a relationship with, and then going forward, you can expand that data set to look at how, weather patterns impact, or if you have a flood that's coming out of Indonesia, how's that going to impact the coast of Africa, or vice versa?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do double down on the regions that, because we put the supercomputer in those countries. Mm-hmm. So Uganda, they already have a version of it. We will deliver an upgraded version this summer. So we double down on the countries and around the countries where we have agreements. But, we worked on Singapore a lot, not with the government, but for our own, see how much better it works than the existing systems. And it works it was way better than and Singapore is a country that already, it's not on the bottom of the food chain. It's a country that is, has a very complicated climate. And, so we picked a difficult one to internally, make sure that we know what we're doing. So we do a lot, and now we're doing tests also in California so that we can also see. It was very interesting when we were in Uganda, in Kampala, we were presenting, and we had already put a small version of the supercomputer in their operation room, and the same day, their weather forecasting it was not going to rain, and ours said it was going to rain, and it started to rain. So that is, it's, but it makes my life way easier when, because otherwise it's a bunch of words. We do this 10 times better. 10 times better is hard to quantify, but if their system says it's wonderful weather and all of a sudden it starts raining, it's like, okay, we do it 10 times better. And those are the things those tangible things that help.
It helps
But
them
only,
drive those data-driven decisions that they weren't having before. Yeah.
You can only do it if you're boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
If you just brief through Zoom calls, and it's hard to do. If you're there, it makes it much easier to have then those moments that much of people would say, oh, you were lucky. Well, you make your own luck most of the time.
So what's next for Atmo? What's next for you and Atmo? Is it continuing what you're doing now? Is there...
Yes, continuing and, going more throughout the world. Of course, we're a startup, so we need to raise funds. And, when venture capitalists hear that we sell to governments, they see governments oftentimes as enemies. It's like, oh my God, governments are complicated. I got to tell you, big companies are complicated too. If you go to the big corporations around the world, they're not easy to get in. So for someone who has the expertise that I have, but I've worked for 20 years more with governments, it's not that complicated. It is complicated, don't get me wrong, but it's not more complicated than others. But here, especially I find in Silicon Valley, there's like foreign governments, Loon at the end of the day also shuts down. But that was a moonshot, and it was a technological moonshot, and it was a diplomatic moonshot, because, here at Atmo, I focus on a country, I focus on a region, but the supercomputer goes in a country or goes in a region. It doesn't fly over the whole world to get to Uganda, to get to Kenya, or to get to Indonesia, because those countries usually are surrounded by countries who don't want them to get to what they're getting. So the challenge with the Loon was, we need Tanzania because we have to fly over Tanzania. Well, Tanzania hates Kenya, so there's no way they let us fly over. And there's nothing Anna can do to change that, because these are countries that dislike each other for decades. So that's not something that's part of, tribal challenges and all the rest. So Loon was extremely interesting, but it was a diplomatic conundrum. Whereas Atmo, it's complicated, but it's totally feasible, because we're talking, and if a country doesn't want us, we just go to another one. There's 180 countries out there who do not have access to weather, the weather prediction that we have here in the US. So there's also choice. If Brazil doesn't want to have anything to do with the technology, let's go to Peru. The world is big.
We're at the point where we need to wrap up for today, but throughout this conversation, you as a woman have mentioned some really interesting advice about how you've been able to overcome diverse scenarios, how you've really had good mentors, male or female, that have been able to guide you into some of those decisions. I'd be interested in, at the close, what are some lessons learned, or what are some advice that you can give to other women where they may not be in your field of international affairs, but you've been in some extremely difficult, challenging scenarios and environments, and with very strong personalities, that I think some of the advice that you could give today could easily be leveraged by myself or anyone else listening?
And it's something that I tell myself also, because, when you're in a specific part of the world, you're just taken by, the sacred fire, and you make decisions that we overthink everything. I find myself now, it's like, well, do I want to stay in California forever? Do I want to move? Oh my God, the apartment, I like this apartment. And we overthink. It's like, sometimes if something shows up, just do it. Don't come up with a PowerPoint slide with pros and cons and then think, and then you'll find more cons if you focus on it. If I had thought about all the decisions I made, I would probably live in Milan and work for Sony, which I would have hated my whole life, because the pros there on paper were way higher than the cons. What at that point in life, is like, well, it's easier to find a husband, it's easier to have a family, it's easier to have, not be constantly changing jobs is stressful. In Italy, you get a job, you keep it for 30 years. I had a job at Repubblica. It was a full-time employment, 30 years with insurance, everything paid. Had I really taken the slide and put pros and cons, I would have never left. But then I would have been doing something that I'm saying journalism is great, but I would have struggled with. Would I be a happy human being? Probably not. Would I have kids? Probably yes. But I am happy. I'm a happy human being now. And I'm also forcing myself, don't overthink, because this world pushes you to overthink things too much. And I brought it maybe to the extreme. I'm not saying one should do that, but I still think that when I mentor young people, and especially young people, there's this thing, well, I can't take a year off. I wish I had taken a year off, after university. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Think of work, don't do nothing, don't sit on the sofa and wait till the illumination shows up. But it can't always be only focused on career and what do I want to do when I, try things out. And worst case scenario, they don't work out. You'll find something else. We're too dramatic about life choices.
I like that. I really like that. I will definitely use that as I reflect my next major decision. I think that's really good advice that I personally probably haven't thought about, but it's very relevant going forward. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Thank you, Anna, for spending, the last 45 minutes with me. This has been absolutely fantastic. And I look forward to see what you and Atmo are going to do in the future.
Me too.
Yes. Thanks again.